Well, I'm joined now by Mikaela Peterson. Mikaela, lovely to see you. So I interviewed your dad, Jordan Peterson. Let's get that out of the way quickly. What's it like being Jordan Peterson's daughter starting?
Well, it's opened a lot of doors, I think, that wouldn't have been open to me. So that's one thing. It's extremely dramatic. It's somewhat stressful. Ever since he went viral in 2017, our lives have just been turned completely upside down. So I was reading an article earlier about how Jordan gets on TV and cries about being famous. And I used to look at celebrities and think, oh, if they're complaining about fame, what are they complaining about? You have money and opportunity, like, stop it. But the amount of stress that also comes with that, I think, is hard to understand unless you experience it.
Had a huge impact on him, on your family, on you, everyone, right?
Yeah, it's been wild, but I can't complain about the opportunity. I mean, I've taken advantage of that as much as I can.
Well, you've become a big star yourself. You know, when I tell people I'm interviewing you, young people are like, oh, wow, that's great. You know, you've got nearly 1 million subscribers to your YouTube channel. You're doing these huge numbers on social media. What is it about you? It's not just because you're Jordan's daughter. There's something else. What is it you think that's really grabbing people's attention?
Well, I hope that I'm telling the truth. I don't really care what people think of me. And I think my health story also influenced a lot of people because there's so many chronically ill people, and so I brought a lot of people into the personal aspect of that. And then I guess I'm a fairly disagreeable female, which I think is attractive to some people.
But I would find that quite agreeable.
I'm polite, and it depends. We might agree on a lot of things, so that might be it.
We probably agree with more than you think. Just for those who don't know your health story, very quickly, tell me what happened.
I had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis since I was 2. I was diagnosed when I was 7, and then my health just went downhill. So I was depressed, I had chronic fatigue, my skin was a mess. I was on like 8 medications and I couldn't function. I couldn't get out of bed. And when I was 22, I decided the medical system wasn't helping me. I'd had my hip and ankle replaced. Like I'd had years of being on painkillers and things. And so I took it into my own hands, and that was when I was 22 when I realized that if you have issues in your life, nobody other than you is going to fix them. And I used to go to the medical community because that's what I'd learned to get help, and that wasn't working for me. So I started to delve into diet. I went back to school for a biomedical degree, which I didn't end up finishing. I did a couple of years of that, and I started delving around in diet. So, like, long story short, I ended up only eating meat, which I think is also kind of what helped people start following me because they're like, what's this weird all beef woman up to?
How long did you do that for?
I'm still on it. So
and you literally only
6 years.
You only eat meat still?
Yep.
Talk me through a day's diet then.
Strip loin. Strip loin steak, that's
So you wake up in the morning, what do you have for breakfast?
Strip loin.
What do you have for lunch?
Strip loin.
What do you have for dinner?
Sometimes strip loin in soup.
And dinner, same?
Yeah.
So you have 3 steaks a day? That's
yeah. I would change it. I would change it if I could, but as soon as I add anything back in, like there's still some underlying crazy autoimmune problems. Anytime I add anything back in, I get
arthritis. You have no
arthritis.
vegetables or anything? You just...
Nope.
Nothing, just the steak?
Yeah.
Do you have any sauce?
No.
I mean, it's kind of fascinating. How long have you done this? 6 years?
Yeah, 6 years in December.
You look like you're bursting with good health. I mean, what do the experts say about this?
Depends on the experts, but mostly, you know, you should have died by now is usually the reaction I get.
But do you oddly feel healthier than you've ever felt?
Oh my gosh, as a teenager, I told you, I couldn't get out of bed.
Yeah.
And I had my hip and ankle replaced. I couldn't walk. So, I mean, my baseline was nearly dead.
Right.
So compared to that, I feel great.
Do you
I'm not depressed
do you
anymore.
like steak, or are you now sick of it?
If I had to live off of only one food, it would be New York strip loin. So at least there's that, right?
And if you go to a restaurant, you just have steak?
Yeah, just with salt.
Just with salt?
Just with salt, yeah.
I mean, I love a steak with salt, but 3 times a day, every day, 7 days a week?
The alternative is worse. So that's why.
Do you drink alcohol?
I do sometimes.
You can have a nice glass of wine
That puts a bit of a skew on the diet because they're like, oh, you can only eat meat, but you can have some vodka. But vodka doesn't seem to give me arthritis. So
funny enough, Bear Grylls, the explorer, he tried veganism for a while, then renounced it all, now feels ashamed by it, and he's gone pretty well full on meat as well, I noticed.
Meat and vodka?
Probably. You'd have to, given the things that he does.
Yeah.
So that's the story, and that's what really electrified people's interest in you. But since then, your opinions have also become things that people are following.
Yeah, weirdly enough.
How would you categorise yourself in terms of your position, for example, on things like masculinity? Where do you sit with that? Because I know what your dad does. I've interviewed him, obviously.
I don't think I'm quite as conservative as my dad, but I'm pretty conservative compared to the average person. This whole trans debacle is really pushing me into, I don't know what, like a form of feminism or something. Just like, it's so insane that
Yes.
I feel like I need to protect women, even though it's basically women causing this. But I don't know, view on masculinity. I think men are having a harder time, which is why people like Andrew Tate popped up, and people like my dad.
Yeah. And there's no doubt, I mean, when I walk around, having interviewed both Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate, the number of young boys, like late teens, early 20s, that come up to me about those interviews, months and months, sometimes a year later, and wanting to talk about them, really curious what I thought of them and what I feel about that. It showed me there's a lot of young men who are wandering around kind of aimlessly and wanting direction. And they feel with your dad and with Andrew Tate and these others that they feel like at least somebody is trying to understand them and to guide them.
Yeah, I'm so incredibly grateful for my dad. I don't know if I would have been able to figure out my health problems if I hadn't had him as a father, because he basically told me I needed to fix my life. I couldn't use my health as an excuse, even though it was a legitimate excuse. And I think people aren't told how to make plans with their lives. Like, hey, what's the goal you want to achieve? What are the steps you need to follow in order to get there? Just something as simple as that. And so I know people like my dad tell people how to do that, and it changes their lives, because there they go. They have a plan, and then it works out.
Why are so many young people anxious? What is this anxiety epidemic about, do you think? Is it dopamine from the constant sensory overload of stuff they see on their phones, or what is it?
Well, I think it's multifaceted. I mean, the political atmosphere is a disaster. What you're being taught in school is a disaster. Social media seems to be a disaster, so that's got to play a role. And then there's no gender anymore for any of these kids in school. That's got to be mentally confusing. And then I think there's a health crisis in America. I think I was one of the people that got hit by that, so I know that the health crisis is impacting people's mental health.
Probably exacerbated by the COVID pandemic.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It separated people. It created a lot of loneliness. A lot of people. It made it worse, right?
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, COVID was a disaster, especially in Toronto. Massive problems there.
Right, but do young people also, have they developed a kind of inability to deal with normal life stuff? I mean, I sense that there is a problem there in just getting through day-to-day normal life. A lot of young people are struggling. Why?
I don't think that they think they have control over anything. I think they're taught in school that they don't have control over the government, they don't have control over their lives, so if they're dealt a bad hand of cards, then there's nothing they can do about it, and then they get resentful and hopeless, which is why people like my dad, I think, have gotten famous, because it's like, no, you do have the power to change your life. You just need to make a plan, and you have to stick to that plan. You have to work on it. So I think it's people feeling lack of control over their destiny.
Your dad got emotional with me. He cried quite openly, talking about the lost men, really, of our generation. Is he very emotional at home when you...
He is exactly the same person on camera as he is at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly the same.
I mean, it must be, in a way, it must be quite exhausting, but also incredibly intellectually stimulating to be around someone like him.
Yeah. I mean, we got taught about the psychological significance of the Bible when I was like 7. So that was like dinner table talk. I had no idea that my dad was weird until I was like 24.
You see, until I met him, I thought he was maybe weird or very controversial or whatever. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to meet. And when I met him, I didn't think any of those things. I thought he was unbelievably bright. He really thought through these issues. He'd obviously been massively misunderstood or deliberately mischaracterized. And I came away thinking he's a force for good if people actually listen to what he says.
If they listen to what he says.
Yeah.
But people like sound bites. They're so much easier to digest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the Peterson clan, then, what is life like now? I mean, you've come through this maelstrom of years of chaos and attention and fame and so on. Where have you washed up?
We're still kind of in the middle of it, but I think we're more emotionally resilient. So when articles used to come out about my dad, they used to hit him really hard. Like a New York Times article would come out, somebody would come into our house, pretend to be all friendly, and then boom, this negative article. That was really hard. Every single time that happened, it was a catastrophe. And now we're not fazed at all. He's not fazed at all. So we've gotten used to it that way. But I don't think the controversy stopped. Like, where there's definitely more people. This is one thing that's weird that happens when you have money, is people come after you. I didn't realize, I'd heard about that, but I didn't realize that happened. So we're dealing with that in like 4 different ways.
You mentioned politics earlier. I mean, what are your politics? Who are you going to vote for? Obviously, are you still Canadian citizen? Or?
Yeah, so
right, so you'd only vote
here.
Well, you wouldn't vote for Trudeau, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
And
Canada
he's the
is
king
so
woke,
screwed.
right?
Yeah, no, I moved out of Canada. I moved out of Canada in 2021 because the downtown Toronto had been destroyed, and I thought there's no way this isn't getting significantly worse. And it is worse. I'm back this summer. It's much worse. So yeah, Trudeau's definitely no. Canada's screwed, I think, for the next 10 years.
What do you think of the likes of Meghan and Harry, who position themselves as the priest and high priestess of wokery?
I pretty much ignore those two. What do I think of them? I don't think they're particularly bright, and they're very famous. And so...
And hugely privileged whilst moaning about their lives all the time. I don't think it ever flies with the regular public, right?
Yeah, precisely.
What are the things, when you get up in the morning and you've had your steak, and I'm looking forward to your next steak, when you get up there, what are the things that really exercise you? What do you care most passionately about?
Well, my dad and I, and we have a team, well, we've been working on a project called Peterson Academy, which is launching in November. I think that's probably my passion right now.
And what's it really, at its essence, what's it about?
Well, I went to university. I took 4 years. I took 2 half degrees, and it was woke in 2012. And so I was paying for courses that were taught through a feminist perspective, and it really pissed me off. And I know that the average university degree now in America costs students between $100,000 and $200,000. And it teaches them to hate their country, that they have no control over their lives, and doesn't set them up for jobs. And so we thought, hey, we have access to the top professors across the world. Let's grab those. Let's film really high quality, like Netflix-like lectures, and let's give people access to a degree for $30 a month. Just flatten the education system. So we're hoping to reduce the price of a university degree by offering a general education degree that teaches people how to think and how to have intellectual conversations with anybody. So like history, politics. We even have a course on like how to dress well, to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Just something that I hope everybody can access. And
As you do, as your dad does,
Thank
right?
you.
He's always immaculate as well.
I learned from the best.
You look smart, you dress smart. I think you behave smart, I think.
Thank you. It's
My mother
trick.
always told me to dress as if I'm about to meet the Queen, which was handy because then I eventually did. That's why I always wear a suit. You never know when the monarch may call.
Yeah, no, precisely. You're taken more seriously. Why wouldn't anybody do it? It's a life hack.
What's your message to women who don't want to put their head over the parapet about this gender stuff? Because it seems to be a lot of women get shot down and they're all terrified of speaking up for women.
They'd be happier if they spoke up for women. I mean, you can't not say things. It's not like those ideas go away in your head, right? Even if you're worried about what your brain is telling you, they don't go away. The ideas are still there. So I learned that the hard way. There were a couple of years when I got anxious and I didn't say what I was thinking, and I mean, it drove me crazy. So say what you think, it'll make you feel better. And the repercussions for telling the truth are never worse than lying, ever. Even if it takes a couple of years to catch up to you, they're never worse.
Mikaela, it's great to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me on.
It's great to see you. Send your father my very best.
I will.
And I'll look forward to the Academy. It sounds fascinating. I might even enroll myself.
Thank you.
Good to see you.